And before we started the winery, we obviously made wine ourselves as a home winemaker here for years and years. In fact, it was kind of a thing through generations. Even my father and my grandfather made wine all the time, and it was kind of in our genes, you might say, of winemaking.
I learned as a very young man working under my father in the wine operation and vineyard operation, and also my uncle who ran the agriculture side of our farm. It's nice to be involved in a family operation. Our family was founded by my great-great-great-grandfather in 1843, and I'm sixth generation to take over the operation. So there's a lot of history involved in working side by side with my father and mother and aunt and uncle and other brothers and cousins growing up. It's a nice environment and to grow up in.
Back in the early 70s, my brother Gerald and I we started a U-pick operation on the farm, direct to the customer sales here on the farm. We grew apples and peaches, strawberries and pumpkins, and lots of vegetables on our farm. And we had a farm market that we sold direct to the customers. And we were, by the mid to upper 70s, we were getting well into it and getting a lot of customers. And we wanted to expand and have some other things to sell to complement the farm, and we had the land to grow grapes. And like I say, we have a 500-acre farm here, and plenty of room to grow the grapes. And we did. We finally planted our first grapes in, I think, 1979 or 1980.
Throughout the history of the farm, it's always been a fruit-based farm, a fruit agriculture farm. And once we got into my grandfather, he started selling little products, not only wholesale, but a little bit here in the shade tree retail. People would come out to the farm and buy peaches or strawberries directly from the farm. And my father and uncle in the 60s and 70s really started pushing the retail farming to get people to the farm and get away from the wholesale truck farming. And so by the end of the 70s, we were selling most of our products here on the farm. And in the early 70s, in 1972, Indiana passed the Small Farm Winery Act, allowing small farm wineries to exist in the state of Indiana. And since we were really a big fruit farm, knew how to grow fruit, and the family has been in winemaking as far as we can trace our history, it was a natural for us to get into the wine operation.
We went down to my grandfather's as infants, you might say, maybe just starting in first grade, and he would be making wine in the fall of the year, making the old standard Concord wine, making a couple of barrels for his own family use and, to entertain with and all. And it's sort of like we grew up little by a little with it. And of course, there's a lot of difference between making 1 or 2 barrels of wine for your own family use versus commercially.
We first decide on what kind of wine ultimately do we want in the bottle, and what style of flavors and things like that we want. And then we'll start with either apples or blackberries or grapes like you see behind me, and we'll grow that particular variety of fruit, whether or not it be a particular variety of apple or a particular variety of grape, and grow that fruit for the end result of the flavor profile that we want in that bottle of wine. And eventually get to the year like this that we're out pruning. We're still doing some touch-up pruning in the springtime. We're selecting the buds on the canopy, on the trellis system, that'll eventually give us the berries or the grapes that we want out of the vineyard. That process takes us all the way into about June. We get into late June and July, we're starting doing a lot of shoot positioning and leaf pulling to let certain amounts of sunlight into the canopy to ripen the fruit a little different. Some varieties need a lot more sun than other varieties, and also this helps us out on our disease problems. We get into August, September, and October is when the big harvest goes on the grape wines, and about 75% of the wine that we make today are made from grapes, and the other 25% make up the other fruits that we grow. And so that's the harvest time of year. Harvest is the most critical time because we're looking at the balance of sugars versus the balance of pH versus the balance with the acidity, plus the overall taste and maturity of the fruit. And so that is done in the lab and by taste. So we use a little of the chemistry involved to help us out, but ultimately we're looking for the final taste of the grape. We pick in 1,000-pound bins, and the bins go through a destemming operation, and where we still look for anything coming out of the vineyard that may not need to go into the wine operation. Then it goes into a large press that holds 20,000 pounds of grapes per press load. So totally stainless steel press. It takes care of squeezing the juice out so we don't have to use our feet anymore. Then they go into the different fermentation vats, whether or not we're fermenting in wood or fermenting in stainless, cold fermenting, warm fermenting. We have usually around 16 different yeast that we keep here at the farm, and we inoculate each batch of wine with a pure culture of yeast and a different style of yeast, again looking for that ultimate expression of the fruit. Then after that we go through the processing of the wine, of clarifying it, and then eventually the aging process. Some wines only age anywhere from 3 months up to 6 months. Our grape wines start around 9 months and could go up to 2 to 3 years before we're ready to bottle those. And then our brandies and our ports may be up to 6 to 7 years aging before we bring those to the bottle.
Indiana passed a law that permitted wineries in Indiana to make brandy. And we took a hold of that right away, and I think we may be the only one in the state that has it still, that makes brandy. A lot of these barrels here has got brandy in them, aging, getting it's aged before we can really call it brandy. Some of the barrels, we actually went to our woodland area and cut the trees down off of our farm to make the barrels out of. So we air dried the wood for like 3 years and took it to a cooper. As of this past December, we got our first brandy on the market. We made one bottling, and I think it has to be aged at least 2 to 2.5 years in the barrel before it can be called brandy.